Chosen one. There is something you need to understand about your life that most people will never realize about theirs. And it's this. You were never delayed in the way you thought you were. What you experienced was not a lack of progress, not a series of missed opportunities, and not a sign that something was wrong with you. It was something far more intentional, something that only makes sense once you step back and look at the full pattern of your life instead of isolated moments. For a long time, it probably felt like things were not happening when they should. You watched others move forward, reach milestones, build connections, and step into opportunities that somehow never fully aligned with you. And even when something did come into your life, it often didn't last the way you expected. It either changed, disappeared, or led you somewhere completely different than you originally thought. That creates a very specific kind of frustration, the kind that makes you question your timing, your direction, and sometimes even your worth. But here is the truth that most people are not ready to hear. Your life was not delayed. It was protected. And there is a difference, because delay implies that something is being held back without purpose, while protection implies that something is being preserved until the right conditions are in place. What you experienced was not random waiting. It was controlled timing. It was the kind of timing that doesn't always feel comfortable, because from your perspective, it looks like nothing is happening, when in reality, everything is being arranged in ways you cannot fully see yet. Think about the times when something you really wanted did not work out. At the time, it probably felt like a loss, like something important was taken from you or never given to you in the first place. You may have replayed those moments, wondering what you could have done differently, or why things didn't align the way they seemed to for others. But if you look at those situations now, with the awareness you've developed, you can start to see something different. Many of those things were not meant to stay, not because they were bad, but because they were not aligned with where you were going. And if they had stayed, they would have limited you. They would have anchored you to a version of your life that you were never meant to remain in. That is why things were removed, redirected, or simply never allowed to fully form. Not as punishment, but as preservation. You were being preserved for something that required you to be in a different state, a different level of awareness, and a different level of readiness. Now here is where it becomes even more important to understand. Protection does not feel like protection when you are inside of it. It feels like restriction. It feels like limitation. It feels like being held back. And that is exactly why it was so difficult for you to accept while it was happening. Because from your perspective, you were ready. You felt capable. You felt like you could handle more, do more, and move forward faster. But what you could not see at the time was everything that had not yet been built inside you. Because readiness is not just about what you want, it is about what you can sustain, and there is a big difference between receiving something and being able to maintain it. Many people receive opportunities they are not ready for, and because of that, they lose them just as quickly as they gain them. Not because they didn't deserve them, but because they didn't have the internal structure to support them long term. You were not allowed to build your life that way. You were not allowed to move forward without foundation. So instead of being given everything quickly, you were given something much more valuable. Time to build, time to understand, time to develop awareness, discernment, and stability. And that time may have felt slow, even frustrating, but it was doing something very specific. It was strengthening you in ways that cannot be seen from the outside. Now let's talk about something you've probably noticed. There were moments in your life where things almost worked out. Almost opportunities that were close, connections that felt right at first, situations that seemed like they were about to become something real. And then suddenly, something shifted. Something didn't align. Something changed. And it slipped away. At the time, those moments can be the most confusing because they feel like they were supposed to happen. They feel like they were within reach. And when they don't fully materialize, it leaves you questioning everything. But those almost moments were not mistakes. They were checkpoints. They were showing you what is possible, without fully giving it to you yet. They were allowing you to feel the direction you are moving toward, while still keeping you from locking into it prematurely. Because if you had fully stepped into those situations at that time, you would have accepted them as final. You would have settled there, and you were not meant to settle at that level. You were meant to grow beyond it. Now here is something deeper that you need to understand. There is a difference between being ready to experience something and being ready to embody it. You may have been ready to experience certain things earlier in your life, but you were not yet ready to fully embody the level required to sustain them. And that is why your life did not move the way you expected. It was not about denying you. It was about preparing you. And preparation takes time, not because it is slow, but because it has to be thorough. Because what is being built inside you is not temporary. It is not something that will fade when circumstances change. It is something that will remain stable regardless of what happens around you. That kind of stability requires depth, and depth is built through experience, through reflection, and through time. Now think about how you process things now compared to before. Think about how you respond to situations. Think about how you see people, opportunities, and decisions. You are not the same. You don't move the same. You don't react the same. You don't attach the same. And that difference is not accidental. It is the result of everything you went through during that period that felt like delay. That period was building your foundation, and now that foundation is in place, something is beginning to shift. You may have already felt it. A subtle sense that things are starting to move, not in a chaotic or overwhelming way, but in a more aligned and natural way. Like pieces are beginning to connect without being forced. That feeling is not random. It is the result of alignment beginning to take place. Because once the internal structure is built, the external movement follows. That is the or not the other way around. Most people try to build their internal stability after their life starts moving, and that is why things fall apart. But your life was structured differently. You were built first, and now you are going to move. In the next part, we are going to go deeper into why your life followed this pattern so consistently, and why it felt like no matter what you did, certain things remained out of reach until now. Because once you understand that, you will stop seeing your past as something that held you back, and start seeing it as something that positioned you exactly where you need to be. Chosen one, now that you understand that your life was not delayed but protected, we need to go deeper into something that has probably stayed in your mind for a long time. Even if you never said it out loud, why did everything always feel like it was almost yours? But why did opportunities come close, relationships feel promising, and paths seem clear, only for something to shift at the last moment? The almost feeling is not random, and it is not bad luck. It is one of the clearest signs that your life has been guided by a different kind of timing. Because most people experience life in a linear way. They see something, they pursue it, they get it, and then they figure out how to handle it afterward. But your experience has been different. You were allowed to see what was possible, but not always allowed to fully step into it right away. That creates confusion, because from your perspective you felt ready. You felt like you understood enough, like you could handle what was in front of you. But what you could not see was the difference between being emotionally ready for something and being structurally ready for it. There is a level of internal structure that determines whether something can last in your life. And that structure is not built through desire. It is not built through intention alone. It is built through experience, awareness, and repeated refinement. And that is exactly what your life has been doing. It has been refining you, not by keeping things away from you completely, but by letting you get close enough to understand them without allowing you to lock into them prematurely. Think about how many times something looked right at first. It made sense logically, it felt right emotionally, and it seemed like it was finally your time. But then something didn't align. Either you saw something you didn't notice before, or the situation revealed a side of itself that changed how you felt about it. And in that moment, even if it was disappointing, something inside you knew that it wasn't right anymore. That is not failure. That is awareness activating. And awareness always comes at the right moment, even if it feels late. Because if you had fully stepped into those situations without seeing what you eventually saw, you would have committed to something that was not aligned with who you were becoming. And once you commit to something like that, it becomes much harder to move away from it later. So instead of letting that happen, your life kept interrupting those paths at the exact point where you could still step back. Now this is where it becomes even more important to understand something. You were not being trained to chase opportunities. You were being trained to recognize alignment. And those are two completely different ways of moving through life. When you chase opportunities, you focus on what looks good, what feels right in the moment, and what seems to move you forward quickly. But when you recognize alignment, you focus on what actually fits your path, your growth, and your long-term direction, even if it doesn't come with immediate results. That shift takes time to develop, because in the beginning, everything can look like an opportunity. Everything can feel like progress. And without discernment, it is very easy to move in directions that seem right at first, but don't hold long-term. So your life slowed you down, not to stop you, but to sharpen you. Every almost moment forced you to pause, reflect, and reassess. Every situation that didn't fully work out gave you more information, more clarity, more understanding. And over time, that built something very specific and harder to convince into something that doesn't fully align. And that is not something most people develop early in life. That usually comes much later after people have gone through repeated cycles of committing to the wrong things and dealing with the consequences. But you were guided through that process differently. You were shown instead of forced. You were redirected instead of trapped. Now, let's talk about the emotional side of this, because this is where it becomes real. Those almost moments didn't just teach you logically. They affected you emotionally. They made you question timing. They made you question yourself. They made you wonder why things kept stopping right before they fully began. And that feeling can create doubt if you don't understand what is happening. But now that you do, you can see it differently. You were not being denied. You were being filtered. Your path was being filtered in real time, removing what didn't match, refining what did, and guiding you towards something that requires a higher level of stability. Now here is something even deeper, because this process did not just affect what came into your life. It also affected how you see yourself. At first, you may have measured yourself based on what you didn't have yet, based on what didn't work out, based on what others seemed to achieve faster than you. But over time, that started to change. You began to value clarity more than speed. You began to value alignment more than immediate results. And without even realizing it, your priorities shifted. That shift is one of the most important parts of your development. Because once your priorities change, your decisions change. And once your decisions change, your direction changes. Now you are no longer moving just to move. You are moving with intention. And that intention is what is going to make everything that comes next more stable. Now here is where everything begins to connect with what is happening in your life right now. Because the phase you are in is no longer about being shown what doesn't align. That phase is ending. You've already seen enough. You've already learned enough. You've already developed the awareness and discernment that this process was building. And now something different is starting. You are beginning to enter a phase where things that align will not just appear, they will stay. That is the difference. Not just access, but stability. Not just opportunity, but sustainability. And that is why everything before had to happen the way it did. Because without that preparation, you would not be able to maintain what is coming next. You would experience it, but you wouldn't. And your path was never about temporary experiences. It was about building something that lasts. Something that remains stable regardless of external changes. And now that you are reaching that level of stability, your life is beginning to respond differently. In the next part, we are going to go even deeper into what was actually being built inside you through all of this. Because it goes beyond awareness and beyond discernment. There is a specific internal ability that explains why you process things differently, why you don't break under pressure the same way, and why your life is about to move in a way that feels completely different from before. Once you understand that, everything will connect in a way that removes any remaining doubt about your path. Chosen one. Now we are stepping into the part that explains everything at a deeper level. And I need you to stay fully present for this. Because what I'm about to describe is the real reason your life has unfolded the way it has. And it is something that most people will never fully understand about themselves. Up to this point, we've talked about protection, timing, and the pattern of almost experiences. But none of that fully explains why your path required so much preparation, why things could not simply happen quickly, and why you were not allowed to build your life the same way most people do. The answer is this. It's not that you were being held back. It's that you were being built to hold more. And there is a very big difference between those two. Most people focus on what they can receive. Very few people are prepared for what they can sustain. And your life has been centered around one specific development, your capacity to hold. Let me explain what that means, because this is where everything begins to make sense. There is a level of internal capacity that determines how much pressure, responsibility, opportunity, and expansion a person can maintain without collapsing, losing control, or becoming overwhelmed. This capacity is not visible from the outside, and it cannot be measured by talent, intelligence, or even intention. It is something deeper. It is the stability of your internal structure. And this is what has been built inside you. Not just awareness, not just discernment, but containment. The ability to hold intensity without breaking. The ability to hold uncertainty without panicking. The ability to hold success without losing yourself. The ability to hold pressure without needing to escape it. This is what your life has been preparing you for. Because everything you went through required you to stretch your capacity. Every delay required patience. Every almost required emotional control. Every redirection required flexibility. Every moment of uncertainty required stability. And over time, all of those experiences combined into something that most people do not develop until much later, if they develop it at all. You became someone who can hold. Now here is why this is so important. Because in reality, your life will only expand to the level that you can sustain. Not the level that you want. Not the level that you imagine. And this is why your path could not move quickly before. Because your expansion was being matched to your capacity. Not your desire. Not your impatience. Your capacity. And that required time. Now think about how you respond to pressure now compared to before. There was a time when uncertainty would make you anxious. When not knowing what was coming next would feel overwhelming. When things not working out would shake your sense of direction. But now something is different. You still notice those feelings, but they don't control you the same way. You can sit with uncertainty without needing immediate answers. You can handle pressure without reacting impulsively. You can experience emotional intensity without being consumed by it. That is containment. And that is not something that develops randomly. It is built slowly, through experience, through exposure, through being placed in situations that require you to expand your internal limits. Now here is where this becomes even more powerful, because once you develop this level of capacity, it changes how reality interacts with you. Think about that carefully. It's not just that you can handle more, it's that more can now come to you. Because there is space for it, there is stability for it, there is structure for it to exist without collapsing. And this is what is starting to happen in your life now. You are no longer being prepared to hold, you are ready. And that means your life is going to begin expanding in ways that match that readiness. Now here is something that most people misunderstand. They think success, growth, or expansion is about gaining more opportunities, more connections, more resources. But what they don't realize is that without the ability to hold those things, they become overwhelming. Instead of beneficial, they create stress instead of stability. They create chaos instead of clarity. That is why many people gain things quickly and lose them just as fast. Because their external expansion outpaces their internal capacity. That was never going to happen to you. Your life was structured differently. Your internal capacity was built first. And now your external reality is catching up. Now let's take this even deeper. Because containment is not just about handling pressure. It is also about holding identity. It is about knowing who you are, even when circumstances change. It is about remaining stable, even when your environment shifts. It is about not losing yourself when things finally start to move. And that is one of the most important parts of this entire process, because what is coming into your life next will require you to remain grounded while things expand around you. Opportunities may increase, responsibilities may increase, attention may increase, movement will increase. And without containment, all of that would be overwhelming. But with containment, it becomes natural. It becomes manageable. It becomes sustainable. No, here is where everything connects. Your delays built patience. Your almost moments built discernment. Your isolation built awareness. And all of it together built your capacity to hold. That is the ability. That is what was being developed. That is why your life could not move the way you expected before. Because you were not just being prepared to receive something, you were being prepared to sustain it. And now, you are reaching the point where that preparation is complete. In the next part, we are going to break down how this ability is already showing up in your life, in ways you may not have fully recognized, and how you can identify the signs that your reality is beginning to expand to match your capacity. Because once you see those signs clearly, you will understand that your life is no longer in a holding pattern. It is in motion, chosen one. Now that you understand what has been built inside you, the next step is recognizing how it is already showing up in your life. Because this is where everything shifts from theory into reality. It's one thing to hear about capacity, stability, and containment, but it's another thing to actually see the evidence of it in your own experience. And if you've been paying attention, even slightly, you will start to realize that things have already begun to change. The first sign is that you can hold more without feeling overwhelmed. Think about the situations you're dealing with now compared to before. There may be more responsibility, more decisions, or simply more complexity in your life. But instead of feeling like it's too much, you are managing it. You are handling things that would have exhausted you in the past, and you're doing it without the same level of stress or confusion. This is not because life suddenly became easier. It's because you became stronger in a way that allows you to carry more without breaking. The second sign is that your emotional reactions have slowed down, but your awareness has increased. You're not reacting instantly the way you used to. Instead, there is a pause, a space where you observe before you respond. And in that space, something important happens. You process the situation instead of being controlled by it. This doesn't mean you don't feel things. It means your emotions no longer dictate your actions. That level of control is a direct result of the capacity you've built. The third sign is that uncertainty no longer destabilizes you the way it used to. There was a time when not knowing what was coming next would create anxiety or pressure. You would feel the need to figure everything out immediately, or force clarity where it didn't exist yet. But now, you can sit with uncertainty without rushing. You can move forward without having every answer. And that is one of the clearest signs that your internal structure has strengthened. The fourth sign is that things are starting to come into your life that require more of you. This might show up as new opportunities, new responsibilities, or even new types of challenges that feel different from what you've experienced before. They may feel bigger, more significant, or more aligned with who you are now. And even if they push you slightly outside your comfort zone, there is something inside you that knows you can handle them. That knowing is not confidence in the usual sense. It is recognition of your own capacity. The fifth sign is that you are no longer trying to control everything. This is subtle, but very important. You are still intentional. You still make decisions. But you are not forcing outcomes the way you used to. You allow things to unfold while staying aware and ready to act when needed. This balance between action and patience is not something that can be faked. It comes from knowing that you can handle what comes, so you don't need to force it to happen prematurely. Now, when you look at all of these signs together, a very clear picture begins to form. You are no longer in the same state you were in before. You are not the same person who needed constant certainty, who reacted quickly, or who felt overwhelmed by pressure. You have become someone who can hold complexity, hold uncertainty, and hold growth at the same time. And once that shift happens, your life cannot remain the same. Because reality responds to capacity. When your capacity increases, what you can hold increases. And when what you can hold increases, what comes into your life begins to expand to match it. This is why you may have been feeling a sense that something is about to change. Not in a dramatic or chaotic way, but in a steady and undeniable way. Like things are quietly aligning behind the scenes, preparing to move forward. That feeling is not random. It is accurate, because you are no longer in a phase of being built. You are in a phase of being used. Everything you developed is now becoming functional. Your patience is becoming stability. Your awareness is becoming clarity. Your containment is becoming expansion. And that expansion is already beginning. Now here is something very important to understand as this process continues. As your life begins to expand, it will not feel like the sudden, overwhelming changes that you may have expected before. It will feel natural. It will feel like things are unfolding at the right pace, even if that pace is faster than what you were used to. And this is where many people make a mistake. When things start to move, They revert back to old patterns. They try to control everything. They rush decisions. They overthink opportunities. And in doing so, they disrupt the very alignment that brought those opportunities to them. You cannot do that, because everything that is coming into your life now is responding to who you have become, not who you used to be. So if you go back to operating from your old patterns, you create a mismatch. But if you stay grounded in your current awareness, everything will continue to align. Now here is where this becomes even more real. As you move forward, you may notice that certain things begin to accelerate. Situations that once took a long time to develop may now happen more quickly. Decisions that once felt complicated may now feel clear. And opportunities that once seemed distant may begin to appear within reach. This is not coincidence. This is alignment in motion. And the more you trust it, the more it will continue. Because trust stabilizes expansion. Doubt disrupts it. That does not mean you won't question things. It means you don't let those questions pull you out of your awareness. You observe them, process them, and continue moving. That is containment in action, and that is what will allow you to move through this next phase without losing balance. Chosen one, everything you went through was preparing you for this exact moment, and now that you are here, the only thing left is to move forward without going backward. In the next part, we are going to bring everything together into one clear understanding, because once you see the full picture, you will no longer question your path, your timing, or your direction. You will understand exactly why everything happened the way it did, and more importantly, you will understand what it means for everything that is about to unfold. Chosen one. Now everything comes together, and this is the moment where you stop seeing your life in fragments and start seeing it as a complete design. Because up until now, you were looking at individual experiences, separate situations, isolated outcomes, trying to understand each one on its own. But your life was never meant to be understood that way. It was always meant to be seen as a connected process, a sequence of intentional developments that were building you into someone capable of holding a different kind of reality. Nothing you went through was out of place. Nothing was random, and most importantly, nothing was late. It only felt that way because you were measuring your life using a timeline that was never designed for you. You were comparing your path to people who are not being prepared for the same level of stability, the same level of responsibility, or the same level of expansion that you are stepping into now. And once you remove that comparison, everything starts to make sense. You were not falling behind. You were being built deeper. You were not missing out. You were being positioned. You were not denied. You were being preserved. And now that the foundation is in place, everything that once felt slow is about to feel precise. Not rushed, not chaotic, but aligned in a way that you don't have to force anymore. Things will begin to connect in ways that feel natural. Opportunities will show up in ways that feel correct, and decisions will become clearer because you are no longer choosing from confusion. You are choosing from awareness. This is where your life changes, not because something outside of you suddenly appears, but because something inside of you has stabilized to the point where it can support what is coming. And what is coming is not something temporary. It is not something that will disappear as quickly as it arrives. It is something that is meant to stay. Because you now have the capacity to hold it. Now here is something I need you to understand clearly as you move forward. Do not go back to your old way of thinking, just because it feels familiar. Do not start questioning your timing again when things begin to move. And do not shrink your awareness to fit into environments that no longer align with who you've become. Because you've outgrown that version of yourself. And trying to return to it will only create confusion. You are not in that phase anymore. You are in a different phase. Now, a phase where your internal stability begins to shape your external reality consistently. A phase where you don't have to chase alignment because you recognize it immediately. A phase where you don't have to force progress because it begins to unfold naturally. And this is where responsibility becomes important. Because now you are aware. You are aware of how you process things. You are aware of how your decisions affect your direction. And you are aware of what aligns and what doesn't. That awareness means you can no longer move unconsciously. Every choice matters more. Now every decision carries weight, and every direction you choose will either reinforce what you've built or pull you away from it. So stay grounded. Now let me overthinking, not by controlling everything, but by remaining present and clear. Because clarity is what got you here, and clarity is what will keep you moving forward. Now let me say this in the simplest way possible so you never forget it. You are ready, not almost ready, not getting there. Ready. And your life is about to reflect that readiness. Things will begin to move. Things will begin to connect. And things will begin to stabilize in ways that you may not have experienced before. And when that happens, don't be surprised. Don't question it. And don't try to slow it down out of habit. Receive it, hold it, and continue moving, because this is what you are prepared for. Chosen one. If you felt this shift, if you recognize yourself in this message, then this was not a coincidence. You were meant to hear this at the moment where everything inside you is aligning with what is about to unfold outside of you. And I want you to do something simple. Drop 777 in the comments. Not because it's a trend, but because it marks a decision. A decision to move forward with awareness. A decision to stop doubting your timing. And a decision to fully step into what you've already become. And if you're ready to go deeper, to continue understanding what is unfolding, and how to move with it instead of against it. Stay connected, because this is not the end. This is the beginning of a phase where things start to make sense faster, move clearer, and align more consistently. And the more you understand, the more powerful your direction becomes. Chosen one, your life was never random. And from this point forward, it will never feel that way again.